Hello, creatives, community, and kind folks. Welcome to RPG with DBJ. I am your graybeard, grognard grandfather here to talk about tabletop role-playing games. But today, specifically, we're going to talk about a very strange turn of events that I think ultimately doesn't really mean anything. But here, we love to world build, and we're going to talk about, does it matter about changing the gender roles? Yay, I can see the chat. Yay! Yes, I can actually see them. Yes. Don't know what happened yesterday. I'm a Luddite. Electricity scares me from the olden days. You guys don't remember when Tesla was like changing the world, young folk. So today we're going to talk about, I'm an asshole. Today we're going to talk about changing gender roles, and I want to show you where it comes from. But first, let's get the intro. All right. Now, I normally begin this show just like below, the ticker below, calling for all creatives, community, and kind folks. Well, I'm really going to need, all three categories of participants to be part of this, because I am considering myself an oracle in the prediction of an event that may or may not happen. Yeah, I think I mentioned that. Someone else mentioned that too, as well. And I think, and I guarantee, this is my prediction, that there will be individuals who won't remember those events, and may make it incumbent upon themselves to point out that they themselves don't remember such events. So, what we have here is the Eldritch Lorecast from Ghostfire Gaming, and they are going to have a discussion about the artwork and some of the features in the new Monster Manual 2024, and we're going to discuss that. All right, so hopefully, I won't get dinged for this, but let's just take a listen and see what they have to say, and then we're just gonna have a nice conversation and talk about as the first salvo in the gender wars happens.
Yeah, that's interesting because I didn't
Are you a
look at the
gambling
stat block
man?
directly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of gambling, man, I'm going to jump topic a little bit here because we need something for the thumbnail. So, one announcement that they made that they're patting themselves on the back about is the artwork now depicts, generally speaking, different types of certain monsters. They've kind of mixed up the gender of different monsters that have traditionally been inherently associated with one or the other gender, usually female, honestly. The examples they've shown are hag, dryad, Medusa, all have male versions of those monsters shown in the artwork. The satyr, which I guess is traditionally male. Dale, you might have more insight into that. They're showing a female version.
I'm going to disagree with his assertion that most monsters, when they are shown in their gender, that they are generally portrayed as female, and I'm gonna just have a bit of a friendly conflict with that assertion. I feel like it's easier to visually see the female monsters, but most of the bestial monsters tend to be male coded. And I mean humanoid wise and whatnot. Hey, good morning. Hey, everybody. Is it damn DJ's putting something in the hobby I have not watched before? that even though I ever watched it, yeah. Yeah, I couldn't see anyone's comments, and normally, I know it's a behind the scenes thing. All of the comments from YouTube and Twitch come in to one function, or I would have to go into each of those and pop out the chats and have them appear. But what would happen is, as I switched windows, they would disappear behind the window, and I don't want that. I want them to stay where they are, off to what would be my right and your left. And I like them there. Yeah, except for some reason yesterday they didn't appear, and I had no way of figuring that out. So anyway, I want to disagree with the notion that mostly female monsters are that way, because I would say like ogres, like all the humanoid creatures, right? Ogres and werewolves and goblin stuff. I think maybe culturally we think of as male until otherwise noted, or they just don't have a gender at all, like more of the scaled lizard-like creatures or spiders or something like that. Although no, spiders tend to be, I think we think of spiders as being female. I don't know. It's an interesting subject, but let's let them continue just a little bit.
The succubus incubus is an interesting one. Traditionally in mythology, succubus being female, incubus being male. Now there's a male and female version of both succubus and incubus.
That's, what's a nice way of putting it? Stupid bullshit right there. But whatever. you have a male and female version of both the succubus and incubus? That doesn't make any sense.
And they can, well, I mean, we learned this earlier in an adventure they put out, I think. They can swap which, like the creature can change into a succubus or an incubus and go both ways.
That what I find really amusing, because, and I could just be wrong on this, but it's my understanding that an incubus is just the male version of a succubus and the succubus is the female version of an incubus. And they did have different, like the lore surrounding them was colored by, gendered tropes, but I think it's really funny to just be like, nope, they're just like fully distinct things, and there are males and females of both. It's not a bad thing. I'm not offended by this change in any way. I'm not like wowed by, I don't think it was like super necessary. I don't think that Medusas being women was like a pressing issue of gender equality, but I'm not mad about the change. It's like, okay.
I like the distinction they've made with succubus and incubus specifically, that one is in the material realm and attacks you physically, and one is in the ethereal realm and attacks you more kind of psychically.
The incubus haunts your dreams.
I agree with you, Dale, that like I'm certainly not offended by this change. I think it's fine, and I think it's good to open up that possibility for GMs to kind of realize like, oh, I could create like, a person of the woods who is male, like a wizard of the woods instead of a witch of the woods kind of trope. For me, it comes down to like theme and what those monsters represent through the mythology and what those monsters represent about human anxiety.
Yes.
And usually those things are fairly prejudiced against one or the other gender in that fear, right? The fear of a woman who is out of control, who we cannot master, who is her own free person. I guess just for my part, when playing with that trope or subverting it, I'd prefer a more like uncaged anthology approach where you play into the themes rather than just trying to pretend like they don't exist.
I agree with that. And I think mythologically, we have the warnings to children about strangers and things in the dark and whatnot, and playing into that is kind of cool for tabletop role-playing games. And while I don't, of course, you guys know, I have zero opinion about, creatures needing to be in a particular gender role. It is pretty interesting to like try to play off of the fears of what that means. And it would be kind of cool to play into those. Normally it's just stat block, numbers, roll dice, kill it or don't kill it, right? And then if you want to get a little more detailed, it's more like, hey, let's interact with that weird, strange thing over there, talk with it. Not much deeper than that, but it is pretty. First of all, it takes a mind to go, what would a male version of that be like? What would a female version of that monster be like? And then you get to the point where you're like, well, it really doesn't matter unless you're trying to tell a particular story or theme around something, in which case maybe that does matter in your fantasy, but whatever. Anyway, it's almost over, so let's finish the rest of this. Hear what they have to say, giving some of the news, and then we can start talking about all the terrible things of WotC burning down and Dungeons and Dragons setting fire to itself. So let's let it.
Does that make sense?
Right. Well, Hag is probably the one that for me stands out the most. And you and I had a conversation at some point when you were doing your formidable witches or formidable hags,
formidable
or whatever,
hags,
where we were talking about how it is an extremely, it is in particular so deeply about the anxieties around women and women's roles. It is a hovel in the middle of the woods. It's meant to be a symbol of safety in this dangerous place. The woods are dangerous. Here's a symbol of safety, a house, but actually it's a hag's hut. Oh, dangerous. And she's meant to be someone who cooks and cleans, but actually she uses her broom for flying, and she uses her cauldron for making evil potions. And she's meant to look after children, but instead she cooks them and eats them. Like it's all these things that are taking the depiction of what women should be, what femininity should be, and it makes it evil, and that's why she's evil. And so it is interesting to see it happen with a hag, and it is interesting to think about the implications that shift when the fear and anxiety attached to that type of monster gets flipped into the other gender spectrum.
Yeah.
It's very interesting on this topic, especially because my thought on it is when you're actually playing with those themes, right, there really is no issue. If you have something to say about the relationship between women and society that, uses that story, then yeah, your hag should be all female. But the question here is, D&D, I don't think inherently wants to say anything about femininity or women in society or those kind of cultural connotations. What they want is scary bog witch. And when that is the level of literary depth that you're engaging on, yeah, it makes sense. Get rid of the gendered stuff. Doesn't make any sense to. Then it's weird and kind of stereotypical. And so I think for the kind of game D&D wants to be, this is the correct choice. But it would definitely not be the right choice for a game that had more literary aspirations.
You know what it makes me think of? This is slightly off, and I apologize again. But you know how cyclones are named, where you go alphabetically and you alternate male-female names, typically male, typically female, and then you get to the end and you swap them. So it's like Annabelle, Bruce, Christina, and you do that thing. I only found out recently that that's super recent. Originally, they just all were named after women.
Yep.
And then in the 70s or something, people petitioned them and were like, can you please just stop naming the embodiment of chaos and destruction after women? Like, can we just chill out a little bit? And they said no. And then a bunch of stuff happened. They were like, yeah, okay. So that's what that makes me think of.
I like that the compromise though was like, okay, but it has to be alternating, so it's fair.
What's the D&D supplement that Ash?
All right. That's enough of that. I love it. It's really cool. I love the conversation too. Yeah. It's really cool because on one hand, on one hand, sometimes we don't even think about it. Like when we think about Medusa and hags and things like that, we just go, oh well, it's the evil witch, the woman of the woods or whatever, and then we go like, where's the ogre and the werewolf and the I don't know, the beast man or something, and we don't really think of it. But then on the other hand, you stop and go, wait a minute, hold on. Does the gender matter? Right? Now, sometimes I feel like probably not. And 30, 35 years ago, I've thrown in male Medusa, and I always thought of like witches. Of course, the opposite of witch would probably be warlock. Non-gamified, basically. It would just be a dude in the woods that's like a cultist or a wizard or something like that, and you just use the stat block because it's really just stat blocks. But I like the conversation about that, and because part of it is first turning our minds on to seeing the thing first, and then wondering whether, like, is it about moving the cheese, right? It's which I mentioned the other day, that book, like Who Moved My Cheese? It's if someone moves the cheese, does it really matter that the cheese got moved? Is it like, oh, there's a male hag of the woods? Would it just be an old man that's like a hermit or something? And then you go, for me, I go, oh, well, I mean, like, I guess it kind of fits, right? Yeah, Drew says, I actually like male and female incubi and succubi, leaving them open to explore gender expressions. And I feel like the I feel like, sorry, I just saw another comment. I feel like the succubus incubus thing is a particular, that the monster itself, there shouldn't be two different monsters, it's just one monster, but their expression of it is specific to engendering what we feel as the ideal version of that thing, like the ideal attractive male, the ideal shapely seductive female, and that monster specifically plays on that to draw us in to perform essay and graping of their victims and sucking their life out of them, and or causing them to sign over their souls or whatever fiendish creatures do. But that creature and many charming, shape-shifting, seductive creatures play on our own opinions of, well, that female is not as dangerous, or I'm not controlled by my base desires, and then I look over and go, wooga, what's the comic book thing where, a cartoon thing where like face turns into a wolf and like, ha, 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 woo, she looks hot, it kind of plays into that. And then there's the opposite of that, which is the incubus, which it's like, no, ladies, you were drawn into the same thing. And then hell, there's that category in the middle of the gender fluidity, which has already existed in Dungeons and Dragons. Thank you there, elven gods. That has already existed in Dungeons and Dragons through the mythology and whatnot, and playing with that. I like the idea of doing, because at first I go, I really didn't think about it, and then I go, yeah, I kind of like the idea of doing that. Yeah, but I do see where Dale was coming from, in the sense that, the hag in the woods is playing on the trope of the old lady's just not really that dangerous, but then she's cooking children in the woods with potions and whatnot. Yeah, I love the see, that's what you put on OnlyFans, right? With female orcs and goblins just snatching dudes out of the woods, and the dudes are like going into the woods like, I'm right here, I've rubbed honey on my chest, or some dumb stuff like that. Yeah. Sorry, I'm just catching up with some of your comments here. Yeah, well, why not? Yeah, why can't an incubus just seduce you, and a succubus just grab you and strap you down? Yeah, don't touch me. And the other adventurers are like, why not? Guaranteed a larger percentage than we like to admit would have players out there like, nah, I'm going to fail my charm save against the succubus. That's all right. It's worth it. You're so silly. Yeah, thinking of monsters and gender roles makes me think about Blue Eye Samurai. Perfection. That show, Perfection. Blue Eye Samurai. Let's see if we can find some visuals up here, images. If you guys have or have not seen anything from the Blue Eye Samurai, and should I give away the spoiler alert? Here we go. We'll leave some images up here like this. For those who are not aware, that the here in the States, it was on Netflix. The Netflix animated show Blue Eye Samurai. The Blue Eye Samurai not only has blue eyes, but is a female. They reveal that pretty early in the show. and the idea that it's challenging the conventions of the culture, samurai culture, and how the blue-eyed samurai ends up encountering, I forget the unnamed samurai's name. Like she actually has a name, I believe. But it brings into light the idea that as she travels and goes on her mission of revenge, that she meets other people who are also in categories of being exiled and ignored and lower status because of their features. Hers being blue eyes, but is that the only feature that puts her outside of the norm? Right? It's kind of cool. You're so silly. Level 19 fighter, magic user, thief, acrobat, assassin, who just happens to be a female rust monster. You're so bad. I would call a male witch also just a witch. Warlocks are something different, in my opinion. I don't know. I think, yeah. What is the term? A rose by any other name is still a rose, right? So it wouldn't matter what you called it. You could just use the stat block of anything you want, right? Like, I've always mentioned that some of my favorite stat blocks that I go to, like the Ogre Magi, also called the Oni, the Naga, the Rakshasa, the Manticore, excuse me, the Harpy. Like, I like those monsters because they have a little feature, maybe some movement. Some of them have a little bit of a magical ability in them, and I can reskin, reflavor, reshape any of those and whatever. I just always thought like witch and warlock, although a male witch wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing. It's not like I'd argue the point. I'm arguing the point for world building purposes, I guess would be my thing. You're so bad, but it would be kind of funny though, and kind of cool even if you think about it, right? Like, why would a hag have around her some beefed out, it's just like, yes, honey, go get me some eye of newt, you bastard. And he's like, yes, honey, I'll go. Like, you can have some fun with it, yeah. Yep, elven gods. Yes, from people who may feel this may be the first salvo in a gender war that Dungeons and Dragons started. Nah, you go back far enough. The elven gods were all gender fluid, or many of them were extremely gender fluid. I think including the one that poked out Groom's eye, something like that. Jungineros, hello from Spain. No, hello to you. Cool. Wonder what time it is where all of you individuals are at. You brilliant people. Anon says, my problem isn't the reassignment. Oh, you know what? Let's get rid of this, and let's put your chats up here, just so that we all know where we're coming from here. My problem isn't in the reassignment or even redefinition of gender, but some folks' complete unwillingness to define it. Now that depends on then we can get into that gets into the argument of real life or monsters, because there's plenty of monsters that have never really had a defined. Their portrayal in fantasy has never required, nor has it been defined, what their gender is. Most of the lizard-like folk, like we know about frogs and lizards in our own world, we know that many of those monsters don't really have are not defined by gender, and don't biologically, in a fantasy world, don't run by a specific gender for their portrayal, right? Like we can think of like spiders and dragons as being powerful and bestial, and also having eggs. You know what I mean? And giving birth. And I don't know if giving birth necessarily is a definition of what it means to be female, unless you're just only relating it to humanoids. But yeah, it's really cool. And mind you, like if we have male versions of classically female monsters, we can also decide how they are portrayed in the world. Like a female Medusa, a female Dryad, a female Siren, a female hag. What would that be like as a male? Like, would a male hag be the person in the woods who is still considered the safe person to be around, like the old lady? Or would it be a male Dryad be kind of like a woodland elf with like a bow on his back and a sword or something like that? Yeah. And he says, I need to watch this show. It's great. I think it's got, I'm going to guess it's like 7 to 9 episodes, and they go by pretty quick. And each episode tells a complete story. So there's a slight cliffhang, but each episode is the show is non-linear, so it will go do flashbacks to let you know about, giving you context for the very next scene, and it's done really well. It's brilliant. Yeah. The show reminds me of what's the YouTube channel where it's like every frame is a painting or something. It's kind of like that. Yeah. Manticore has D&D now a woman core. Yeah, exactly. Some things where we add the word man or male into it just happens to be that way, right? Yeah, kobolds are just male dragons. Yeah, right. Because you start to think about it, you're like, huh? I hadn't thought about that. Does it really matter though? Hey Z, yeah, glad to have you back. Almost 3:30 a.m. here, getting ready for bed. So good night. Oh man, awesome. Yeah, 8 episodes. There it is. Yep. Anglerfish, yeah, as the kobold dragon issue, much smaller male that attaches to a much stronger and larger female in order to reproduce. For some reason, I always thought of kobolds coming out of like a dragon egg, like a dragon's trying to give birth to another larger dragon, and then the egg hatches and it spills out like a couple of dozen kobolds, and they're like, damn it. Oh, man. Yeah, Anon says, yet many classic fantasy tales are outright gender parables. And I agree. I wonder if they are, like, is it because of our human propensity to tell stories and to make right at that time rules about us living society. So monsters out in the woods, of course, a male would grab a spear and a shield or something and go out into the woods to defend their loved ones, because at the time you wanted male soldiers to willingly, strap up and get ready for war. So those would be the stories, the great stories that they would hear. And then on the other hand, the dangers females would get into by not adhering to their feminine role are also other stories, and those stories would be amongst children and whatnot. Now, as far as modern day role playing, I feel like, yes, you could both lean into that, kind of like the Bene Gesserit from the Dune series, where they're supposed to be all females, and of course, part of them all being women is that they sit in the background. They're not really supposed to be as scary as we think they are within that world, that people underestimate them. And yet they have this like multi-generational, multi-century plans to literally control the reproduction of the men that they are attached to and whatnot. And I think that's awesome, because that plays into that trope. And although you don't want to play with the feelings of your players, they themselves may also be into it. I mean, for example, not that this has to do with this discussion, but making a monster a child and hiding as a child is a way to play into our assumptions about the dangers of a thing, right? You know, a small child with a stuffed animal, which is a shape-shifted other kind of like really bestial monster or something like that. And people are like, oh, we need to save the child because the child's innocent, you know? And yeah. Draconic kobolds or a blighted civilization. You're so silly. Yeah, why not make them all male? I don't know. I don't think gender quite fits with like a kobold to me. I think they're just, although it is funny because players will want to play some of those monsters. It's kind of like playing a dragonborn lizard folk kind of thing, and then you see artwork of male dragonborn and female dragonborn. It's like, wait, what? And I think that's just to associate for us to make us comfortable with it, not necessarily for that monster, I think. But anyway, we're going to get to, there's some other subjects that I want to bring up for this. Z says, I made males the smarter one, though, just because I already have a lot of female-dominated species. Yeah. Okay. While most dragons are animalistic, there are your genetic freaks. Dragon mages. Drew says, I've mentioned in my Weitstans setting that I can occasionally talk about, has more societies being matriarchal. I mean, men are just too violent to make good leaders. Well, matriarchy isn't as uncommon as we'd like to think it is. You know, there's lots of things men like to beat our chest around, and then there's a whole lot of other things we don't mention. It's like, we really aren't really good at taking care of that. Could y'all ladies take care of that for me, please? Yeah, it's very fun. Oh, here we go. There's Drew putting her dukes up. Yeah. Yeah. But again, of course, you know, it's like, is it because of exposure? Is it biology? Are there monsters that are specific that way? Like, for example, how do we get monsters that are only female or only male? Do hags only give birth to other female hags? That could be a possibility in your world where the female version of that monster only exists because however they are birthed or created is only feminine. A more insidious version of that thing would be the Bene Gesserit version of the Dune thing, where the reason that there's only female hags is because all the male ones get their brains bashed against a rock somewhere, right? And it's just like, ooh, which very much could be a thing that makes that enemy that much more dangerous and deviant and evil, shall I say, that the only reason that there's female Medusa is because they always kill off any male versions thereof, or at least try to. And what a great story for one or more people to want to save the other gendered version of that monster, you know, to keep it from being killed. You know, what if a hag doesn't want the other coven to kill their male child? Would that male child grow up to be a hag or some other monster like an ogre or something like that? You know, I love my hags giving birth to other monsters, but that doesn't necessarily need to be the case. Certain cultures trace the family line through women, which makes a lot more sense than the other way around if you think about it. Exactly. Well, I think one of the things is, how do you prove the child lineage physically without science? Well, we know that child squirted out of one person and didn't squirt out the other one. Like, you don't really know. So it makes sense to follow the female line, because we can literally trace where the child came from. Whereas if you say, well, that guy over there is the dad, it's like, well, if they look alike, yes, but if they don't look alike, you're like, it could have been some other dude, because that dude could have died or gone away and nobody remembers that dude, but we've got the lady around, and it's like, yeah, the lady's like, no, I raised the child's been with me forever, you know. Now, mind you, remember, there's fears of like changelings, children being exchanged or tainted and or placed in the wombs of women in these like mythological horror stories that we have, and that's a thing as well. But that is true. Yeah, following it through the female line, which would make a lot of sense as well when it comes to the creation and birth of many of these other monsters. Like I personally have always drawn hags as being the progenitors of other bestial monsters and things in the woods, but that's not to say that the same can't be said for male versions of those monsters. You know, the idea that an incubus seduces the ladies, and that incubus is now, you know, impregnating women that give birth to what would have ostensibly be monsters living in our homes and whatnot. That's a storyline to be told as well. Like, you know, and also an embarrassment to bloodlines and noble families and whatnot, and players could stumble upon a community that's in an uproar because of it, because the wife is just like, I don't know what you're talking about, and the husband is, you know, they're in a town square arguing about this thing, and the husband's like, you cheated on me, and she's like, no, you were there the whole time, and it was because of a shape changer that caused this whole thing, you know. Yeah. Male hags and female dwarves do exist by aesthetic, but they're so rare that most people never have seen or heard of one. Yeah, the whole female dwarf thing. I don't know. I always feel like while female dwarves having beards could be a thing, maybe it's just my aesthetic that I'm like, no, I would prefer female dwarves not to have beards and just be short and squat and shapely. Anyway, but there's even we like to pick about it, but if you go down a very, very slight rabbit hole, there's a kink for everyone in Dungeons and Dragons, including male hags and male female minotaurs, and I guess mostly minotaurs are male, like mostly satyrs are male, tend to be male because of their girth, and so seeing the female version of said is, you know, we sometimes our lizard brain goes like, would we want that? Maybe yes, maybe no. Have we yet talked about agendered or genderless monsters and how it would affect or exist in the world, like mules? We haven't, but let's do that. In medieval mythology, the incubus and succubus are one and the same, basically shape changers. I agree, and which is funny when they mentioned in Ghostfire Gaming, they were like, they made a separate stat for succubus and incubus, and both succubus and incubus can shape change into the other one. I was like, no, aren't they exactly the same thing? But whatever. So, genderless monsters, I think, makes a lot more sense than a little bit. I don't think we actually even really think about it too much as to what monsters have a gender or not. I don't think it really matters as much, but the story could be told in a setting. I think the difference is, and in really good world building and storytelling, is having different cultures attach different gendered attributes to roles, and then when the players are introduced into it, they are thrown for a loop. So, having a matriarchal society to the south would be in contrast to a much more patriarchal society to the north. And the same would go for those roles as well, right? Like, for example, in history, you know, there's lots of people who will say, well, the men went to war and the women didn't, except when they did. And then when they did, it was always like, that's kind of cool, you know? And some of that may be very pragmatic, right? If a society lives in a dangerous place, it's like, no, your ass is going to learn how to use a weapon, right? Like we don't have time to separate us into little categories, because when the dudes get killed, the ladies going to need to pick up those weapons too. Y'all can't just sit around the hearth hoping that we defend you. And so it could be that one society teaches everybody weapons and all the ladies are badasses with weaponry, when they go into another society that's like, oh, you know, the classic, like, oh, I can't believe you're holding a weapon, you know, young lady, or something like that. Yeah, monsters can be non-binary too. Absolutely. You guys are so silly. Black pudding, the ultimate in intersectional representation. Yeah. Monsters can be non-binary, as well as I guess I could tell. Oh, like for example, if there are gods in your world, and is it possible that as the gods in your world, whether they are of a particular gender or gender fluid, could it be that the followers of those gods want or would prefer their followers to become unto the gender in which the godling is? So for example, there could be something like let me pick something that would be controversial of sorts. So there's a female goddess, a male player plays a character, a cleric or paladin or something that worships the female goddess, and then over time starts dressing and acting, and maybe even there's a physical transformation into a female over time, and it's expected if you are a follower of that godling or something. That's a possibility in the world. There could also be a culture, imagine a culture in which survival has always been necessary because they live in a harsh climate. And in order to, we know in ancient peoples, to survive, you need to keep your bloodline going as far and wide as possible. So you must reproduce. I wonder, in a fantasy realm, could you have individuals in the community that volunteer or are chosen, or it's an accepted natural phenomenon that members of their culture will shift genders based on their survivability? Males become females, females become males based on survivability, whether that's over a course of months and it's just a natural thing and they just accept it, or it could be over moments. Like, we need as many men to defend the community, and a number of the women step up and become, like, their bodies shift, and then when they are in their safe havens, that many of the men become female to reproduce so that they can extend the tribe out or something like that. Would be very good for, like, fae creatures, I think. Fae creatures not having a gender, except maybe they pick it based on who they interact with, that they may not have a gender at all and only become a gender based on their interactions with other people. Like, you can imagine the fiendish incubi, succubi only exist as a reflection of the person they interact with. So like a doppelganger is the same way, right? The doppelganger sees someone and then shifts into the being that they instinctually or magically feel that their victim would be most attracted to, and they don't really have a control over what gender they become, if any. Paladins and drag. Now that is something I would play. I would have a setting for that now. Yeah, why not? I mean, what is, if the gods are real, okay, here's another. Let me play with the gods are real. Funny thing, because I'm just throwing out world building. Okay, so there is a god of war, a big old masculine god of war, and you're supposed to grab a weapon and go defeat everyone. Now, this god of war doesn't care about your gender, but does expect you to marry and have children and be fruitful. So you may wonder, well, wait a minute, if there are female war acolytes, how does the female give birth and to other warriors to spread the armies and whatnot? And the answer may be, it's expected that the female marries other women to have a harem of sorts or whatnot, because that's expected from the godling. It could be that behind closed doors, maybe magically, the god grants specific gender modifications temporarily so people can engage in certain things. Maybe there's, I know this sounds even strange, maybe there's no modification at all, but the god allows same-sex genders to reproduce with each other because it's just magic. Yeah, I mean, who's to say, right? Like, and everyone's like, wait a minute, but they're both female or they're both male. How do they, wait, so did you just reproduce with them? And they're like, yep, yep, live with that, suck it, right? Well, who's to say? Yeah, why not? Blood for the blood god, skulls for the skull throne, babies for the baby forge. Yep, why not? Yeah, why not? You know, I mean, we already have like the see, you're funny. Yep. Remember, what was it called? Was it called a girdle? Girdle of sex change or something? Yep. No, I'm not going to ignore that at all there, Z. I'm not going to ignore that at all. But in what was it, AD&D, in the Dungeon Master's Guide, one of the magic items, it was cursed. It's so funny. It was a girdle of sex change. Yeah, hell, in for those who don't know, there is a room in the Tomb of Horrors that changes your characters without a saving throw from one gender to another. And that was supposed to be a cursed, harmful thing that happened to your characters or something. It's like, whatever. It's so stupid. But that's a truism. And I think the only reason that it is a problem at all would just be that it does break. We are biased creatures. You know, as human beings, we have a bias. Even myself, who claims to not have a bias, I have a bias. Even if that bias is not having one, although I do have a bias because it's unconscious, right? We're all biased creatures. We tend to want to be around things that make us comfortable. And so when something is unpredictable in our external world, we find it unnerving because we don't know what to predict from it. And so when we see someone and we are unable to predict that person's gender, it makes us uncomfortable because it is something that we can't predict. We don't know what that represents. Now, of course, realistically, it's none of our business, right? Unless I plan on engaging with this external person's genitalia, it doesn't matter what their genitalia has or what they're attracted to, because all I want is my hamburger or my oil changed, right? Like, who cares? But we human beings tend to, when we don't understand something, we fear it. And then when we fear it, we hate it because we hate our own fear. And therefore we want to destroy that thing simply because it's different from us. And so, yeah, that's a real thing. Let me see if I can find it. Girdle. See if I can find it. Let's see if I can find what page it's in, because there's a bunch of forums about it. Belt of transition. It had to be called a girdle too. D&D wiki. Let's go to D&D wiki. Let's see what it says here. That's 5e. Your body becomes non-binary, nothing happens, or you become male if you were previously female, and vice versa if you weren't male or female before you become one of those two biological sexes. GM's choice. That's not it. But anyway, it's pretty hilarious that it was even a thing, right? Yeah, I mean, it even rubs people the wrong way just even thinking about it, right? It's weird. Oh no, there's a Reddit. Never mind. Dark Path Reddit post. Yeah, I can't remember what it was called. What is a female lich called? Are licks or liches? Do they even have a gender? Right? I don't know. Is it just because we think of them as male? key is that any story which includes the concept of gender will end up making a statement about gender. Exactly. And instead of taking that risk, many are simply treating the concept as irrelevant. Now, and that depends on how deeply you and your group want to engage in, because we're talking about role playing and world building, right? And just like evil goblinoids and just wanting to beat their ass, sometimes people just want to pick up dice and escape reality and escape those choices and just go, look, good is good, bad is bad. Men here stuck here, women stuck there, but very easy. But I get you, Anon. Like, if you include the concept, then you are making a statement about it. Now, I will say that sometimes we do like to flip things on their head quite a bit. And when I don't mean that in a very like this is the important part of the story or something like that. Like, for example, we normally, when we think of a harem, right? In the animated show Arcane, Mbessa is a very powerful, very masculine coded female warrior woman. And they show a scene where she has, I think, one or more men attending to her. Like a man might have a harem of women, she's a woman with a harem of men. I believe, I can't remember if it was one or more, but it doesn't matter. Anyway, attending to her needs. You could clearly tell that this guy was attending to her needs, right? And in a way, does that break a trope? Kind of. Right now, we're creatives. We're fantasy folk. We're well above that. We go, oh, that's kind of cool, right? Now, there are some people in real life that would go, like, oh, I can't believe they did that. Right? Us, we're fantasy and sci-fi and creatives, in the community. So to us, we go, oh, that's cool. I see what you did there, and we would just move on from that. But that is a way to like flip something a little bit. Like, for example, we often think of nobility and there's kings and queens. So how would we flip that if, like, maybe the queen in this other region is the one that's literally at the top of the podium and the male is, second in command? It could be that way in a culture that you create. And there's a lot of, Anon brings up a point. There's a lot of languages that are male and female coded. The A at the end of words representing female, and the O at the O or I or something at the end of words representing male. Things, so there are some words that are like bonito, bonito, bonita. I'm trying to think of words. Do we have any in English? There's a bunch of words in English that are male coded. So yeah, I think there's language about that. These are alley-oops. So funny. Though those stories and story concept, important both in highlighting what one can do and the other can't, or highlighting that some things that we consider gender exclusive actually are not. I agree with that too. You're always so brilliant. Thank you very much for keeping us on point. So when it comes to gendered storytelling, one of the things could be just poking our finger in the eye of telling the society what they can or can't do. And an example of that would be, we see that in Mulan, right? A woman can't be a warrior, and then you find out that she's actually a badass, and then the men around her realize like, oh yeah, she is a badass. And we see that Shakespeare stories have a lot to do with that. Something to do about nothing. Oh, I can't remember the Shakespeare story of the woman that dresses as the man falls for this person he thinks is a guy, but it's really a woman. And that story's been told in like Disney, swapping stories and whatnot, but we've seen that plenty of times as well. Also, the players may not realize that they're falling into those tropes, and when a man and or woman wants to break that trope, then the players realize that maybe accidentally reinforcing that, and then the story is told about them breaking out of it. Like, for example, initially the Bene Gesserit all being female rubs us the wrong way, because we feel like, well, why wouldn't you, like, what is it about men that you're saying that they can't be? Why wouldn't it be based on aptitude or merit? And so in our modern context, we tend to fall towards merit-based actualization. Like, if you have the capability, why not? You know, who cares? Why put up an artificial barrier of entry to an ability or something of that nature? Just as it would be, for example, the players are going out into the woods and they find an old hermit, male hermit. Maybe they don't think of the male hermit as being a hag because they're so used to hags being female, and then they end up being tricked by this male hermit or male dryad or male siren or male Medusa with the cloak up and whatnot, and then they're like, "Oh, you got us," right? So, corpse, so you could lich or lick, like, I don't know. I've always called it lich with my American stateside tongue. It's based on a German word, and I don't know. It could be pronounced lich, could be which means just corpse. So you tell me if you think gender is in any way relevant to a corpse. Yeah, and I guess it depends on the language. Yeah, English has no gendered pronouns for everything, not like German or Spanish. Right, correct. I mean, I think there's some words that I think there are words, not the language itself, but there's a bunch of words that I can't think of right now that are genderfied, that we've just absorbed into the English language. I don't know. Why not? Although I think the hermaphroditic thing, I think is supposed to be pretty vulgar, if I'm not mistaken. I that I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm with you there, Z. Z's like, wait, that word is gender neuter? But this is what I need contacts with Willie people to teach me the language instead of just trying things on my own. Yeah. I could see that too. Yes, thank you very much there with the romantic gendering of languages and things are probably just and also sometimes when it comes to speaking with other people. I think over time, sometimes language just drops things because it's not useful for that particular thing anymore. And again, when we're flowing this back to monsters and such, it may be that, for example, monsters may not only become a certain gender, but maybe like they could be pretty rude if they speak to the player characters. They judge the player characters simply based on their genders, which could also poke players in the eye that the players might accidentally fall into those roles as well. Like, I'm only going to talk to the king, or I'm only going to talk to the lady baker, or I'm only going to talk to the, you know what I mean? And then you've come to find out that the monsters are doing the exact same thing. You know, I'll only talk to the female of your group because they're the weaker one, right? And the players are like, wait, what? Hold on. The female of our group is the barbarian, right? And like, what would you just assume that? There it is. Russell Sabo, thank you very much. Page 226 of the AD&D DM's Guide. Yeah, from 1995 printing lists the girdle of femininity, masculinity. Yep. Girdle. Yeah, I saw that, Sabo. Yeah. Sorry about that. But yeah, exactly. Yep. Slime molds and things like that. Yep. Yeah, the moon has been the moon has often been feminized and the sun masculinized. That's a real word. But we're the fun part of this is, and the uncomfortable part of this is, first poking at ourselves and just talking about our own biases, right? When we see monsters and we normally think of the monster and we go, wait a minute, that female monster's male, that male monster's female, right? Like it's the idea of the female ogre coming around and the players are like, a female ogre? Oh, I hesitate a little bit, but okay, and which maybe we shouldn't. And it's also fun to play with that. And then taking and playing with those aspects, right? Like when I mentioned all hags being female, well, how'd they get that way? Is that just a breeding thing? Or are they going around murder killing or hiring their bestial allies to murder kill all the male babies? And that in itself could be a story unlike any other, where the players are protecting a child that ostensibly in a bioessentialism kind of way will grow up to be evil, but they're the good guys and they're like, I'm not going to let you kill this child for just because you think. Maybe there are shape-changing things out there, succubi, doppelgangers, silver dragons, rakshasa and whatnot, and maybe there's some shape changers that are living a particular gender because they fell for someone. And imagine a doppelganger that was supposed to and has infiltrated a noble family and become like a female who has is very attracted to like the prince, the heir apparent prince, and they have a child. Then come to find out that the doppelganger gets exposed, maybe by others of its ilk, or maybe witch hunters or something. And then the child is born, and it's like, does the prince still care for their child, even though this doppelganger technically isn't necessarily female? But then the doppelganger is female because he's been living as a female this entire time, and then expresses their undying love to their male counterpart, but then shape changes into like a man to defend him, into a doppelgangers into something else, and shape changes into something else, doppelgangers shape changes into something else, and all of that those are great storytelling elements that I think is really cool. And when it comes to gender fluidity, first of all, I think I have zero problem with it. I have it. Not only does it not have any game effect, but even in a world building idea, if you have opponents in your world to some form of gender fluidity or equality or identity or something, those can be the bad guys you get to punch in the throat. Also, role playing, like I've mentioned this before, you can't police imagination. You can't police other people's dreams. You cannot police art at all. For any reason, it's an impossibility. And so if people want to imagine themselves as something else, go for it. First of all, not only could I not stop you, I also don't care, right? Like it's a waste of my energy to try to convince you that you shouldn't be who you want to be in a fictional world based on a game that you purchased for your own use. Right? So if people want to play gender fluid characters, hell yeah. Go ahead and do it. You want to play in my game and do the same thing? All right. Most games don't have stats for that. Now, there used to be a time in Dungeons and Dragons where there were male and female limits to stat bonuses and capabilities, and we know now, like, that's pretty ridiculous because it's fantasy. Also, I think sometimes very young and immature people preload themselves in an image of what they think something is, and then apply that image in their head to what they think the game should be. For example, they'll say, well, women aren't as strong as men because they're imagining a certain size and shape. I can pretty much count a lot of women that are badasses stronger than I am, but they might not have the body shape or size or weight or be in a profession that you think or don't think belongs in that particular gender. Because there's a lot of female weightlifters, bodybuilders, strongman competitions, CrossFit and all that kind of stuff, and they're badasses. You know, now you may not think that their size and shape in a realistic form corresponds with what you think is a thing, but yeah, when your mass and body type goes up, you know, okay, you're a badass, right? You know, there's a lot of cultures where women didn't grow up with a sword in their hand from an early age, but if they did, how do we know that they wouldn't be just as good? And history has already told us that there's many of warrior women that were badasses. So even that puts that away. So yeah, imagine the players protecting a male baby hag just to find out that 2 decades later, as an adult, this child will end the world, and the female hags had been the good guys all along. Ouch. But awesome, right? What a great storyline. Like, the hags have been doing all these things to protect the world from themselves. They're like, we need to kill them because they're going to destroy the world and no one will listen to us. and the heroes are like, we're going to stop you. Which, great twist, right? Great twist. And who's to say that the little baby doesn't grow up, like, it doesn't need to be a male hag. It could grow up to be something else or transform to something else. Like, who's to say that hagism may not be a permanent state? A hag's coven might assemble to ascend one of those hags into lichdom, or rakshasism. What's something more powerful than a hag in the similar category? I don't know. Yeah, men make great warriors, not just because they're muscles, but because they're expendable. Wait, did I say that out loud? Yeah, right? The ladies are like, they do it. We've trained them well. They do what we tell them to do, and they're proud to expend themselves. Bloodied bodies dashed upon the shores of pain and destruction. Hagism is an art. Exactly, right? Well, remember in mythology, the Medusa was cursed because there was a mortal more beautiful than the gods. That can apply to a man. They're like, look at him. He's got washboard abs. This is stupid. The gods punish that dude, turn him into a Medusa. Yeah. Although, if I can get a little dirty, doesn't necessarily have to have snakes for his hair. Although, where would those snakes be? Think about it. Talk amongst yourselves. But really, yeah, dire hag. Yeah. Oh man. I'm trying to come up in my mind traditional male coded monsters and how different they would be female. And I think we have a number of have attached feminism to a number of our male coded monsters. Often making them, I would dare say, the fairer monster. Like, for example, we often have a lot of human transformations, right? So human transformation monsters, undead, vampires, werewolves, and things like that. We've seen plenty of cross-gendering in those. But yeah, Greek mythology is extremely gendered. Oh man. Oh, there's some pretty harmful male tropes in Greek mythology as well as the female, right? Like, how many male gods go around essaying and graping mortals, like, all the time? Women power up in 30. Power up, like, oh, I'm female. Oh man, yeah. Once I dispose of 7 more males, I'll power up. Oh shit. But yeah. There's different things that we can play with, especially when it comes to gender fluidity in gaming, that I think could be very fun. I mean, if the gods allow one male to impregnate another male, and then that male needs to be protected, or people start throwing, rotten garbage at that male that is now pregnant, and the players are like, wait, what just happened? Then that would be kind of a fun story to like protect this dude who's getting harassed because his partner impregnated him, in a world where biologically men can't be impregnated except for the gods allowing it, right? And then that becomes an issue of like, well, if the gods said so, is this wrong to do this? But humans don't listen to higher powers anyway, right? And what a great story line that would be. Also, there's nothing stopping us from having our different species in our world, like elves and dwarves and things like that, changing genders over periods of time. Kylie, hey, what's up? Or change, like, for example, elves could change seasonally, or choose to change seasonally as they wish in your gaming world. There may also be a, what's the sci-fi show? The Orville. In the televised show The Orville, there was an alien species of all men. And come to find out that, yes, females are born in that culture, strangely enough, with an all-male society, and those females are then are surgically altered to be men. And what happens when some or many of their culture runs off and doesn't, or is not allowed, or is protected from being surgically altered to become men? In a fantasy world, magic can do that. Fey creatures could do that. A culture that had been so brutalized that they become warrior-like, and their women are magically transformed, or spells are used to transform them into that. Oh, you're so wrong. But women can power up into harpies at any age. Ouch. Well, you won't get off your ass. And the ogre's like, shut up, get off my back, you old hag. And the hag's like, well, I'm not a, well, I am an old hag, but still. Hey, old hag, get me some hag's milk. Anyway, oh shit. So there could be a, I remember in a comic book series, I think they were called Deviates. The title was DV8, and they were a deviant group of superheroes. And there was a young lady whose superpower was to change into a very attractive, thick-muscled, broad-chested man. And she was not lesbian. She liked dudes, but her superpower was to change into this guy, and women would fawn on over her when she was him, and she kind of was like, please step away from me, I don't like this. But that was her superpower, and it's kind of funny. I mean, there could be magic users or clerics or something that change into the gender of their god or goddess or whoever when they perform their abilities, and just change back when they're done. And that might be the epitome. What's the D&D term for jailbait? Ooh, which is why we stay away from things like monsters that only look like children. Which you can have some problematic things with that, because it takes advantage of a normal human society's propensity to protect children, and then it also points out the psychopathy of players that are like, what is it, a child? I'm going to bash that child's head with a brick, right? It's just like, just because it's a monster doesn't mean it should, so that's why like a lot of monsters aren't, or we really don't look too deeply about their childhood experiences. We wait for them to get older so they can make adult choice amongst themselves, so then we can kill them as heroes in our fantasy. But I don't know. It's pretty funny. Did you mean Soon or Sune's charm of imprisonment? I don't know what that is. So anyway, guys, thank you very much for being part of the show. I got to get out of here. Also, everyone have a great day. Have a great weekend. I've got to get out into this in these cold temperatures. I'm sure many of us here in the States are being besieged by the cold from the north, and it's going to go into Fahrenheit wise single digits and negatives coming up in the next couple of days. It's going to be pretty brutal. So guys, everybody have a great weekend. Thank you very much for being part of the show. Thank you very much for letting me rant off just a little bit. Not too controversial, but you got to kind of get the point. Title is slightly clickbaity a little bit, but we talked about it and whatnot. But just be open-minded. Just use these things to make your that's Forgotten Realms jailbait. We don't want our monsters to be underage. Yeah, Anon says as long as it's not windy. I hope not, because wind chill kills you. I'm in Ohio Valley, and those of us, up above a certain latitude in the States, brutal. Cold's just brutal. It's reached down, because I've got family in Atlanta and Texas, and yeah, they got snow and cold and whatnot. And their normal temperatures aren't freezing, but every once in a while it dips down, and they've gotten it as well. So, guys, have a great one. Thank you very much for being part of the show. We'll get into stuff next week. See ya. Peace. I'm out. Bye.